So let's go through the process of a back office changeover. So the process is always get the technician dialed into the old computer. They will get all the ProfitTrack and FPOS information backed up and any other third parties of ProfitTrack. Keep in mind Independent Solutions doesn't do personal files or other business files, it's only ProfitTrack. So anything else will need to be copied to a USB and you'll need to port it over yourself. We can set up a method to make that easier depending on what's available to you from a hardware perspective. We'll touch on that in a moment. So once the technician's got all that information, they'll call you back and say, all right, we're good to set up the new computer. And one or two things is going to happen. Either you're going to plug in the new machine, either by itself entirely and completely unplug the old one, and we'll dial into it and set it up. Now, if you do that, keep in mind if you have integrated FPOS, you're talking a downtime of 30 minutes. You'll also not have any accounts. Now, the other method is that you'll have them both running side by side. Now, this method is preferred because it reduces downtime. So what will happen is the network cable and the power cable in the old machine will be left plugged in to the old computer, and then you'll plug a network cable if you have one spare and a spare network port into the new machine, plus all the peripherals, so your keyboards, your mouse, your monitor, yada yada. Now, one of the other things I'll mention really quickly is that there's usually a display adapter that comes with these in case your monitor has a plug that doesn't plug into the new computer. So from a process perspective, you'll either go to just the new machine at this point, or you'll go to a side-by-side setup. Now, if you have a side-by-side setup, we can set up what's called VNC, which is a program we use to get to other machines on the network, but we can set that up to your old computer. That way you can jump in and grab files as you need them. Now, once that's done, the technician's going to say, leave it with me. I'll go install ProfitTrack and FPOS and whatever third parties you may have. The technician will go through and start setting that up. Now, that varies depending on how much you've got to install, but typically speaking, that's between 1 and 2 hours for that phase. Now, the technician will give you a call back and say, hey, go through it, just make sure I haven't missed anything. It is a lot of steps, so it's very easy for little things like a button to be missing or in the wrong area. So just let us know, we're more than happy to help. Check things like your PDE if you have one, your printer if you have one, and things like that. And if you do have specific software that you know of, always ask the question at some point before the technician's complete, just in case they do need to grab it. So if you have Wedderburn, for example, just mention, hey, I've got Wedderburn scales, do you need to grab a folder for that? Or I've got ePay, do you need to grab an ePay file? Or something like that. The technicians do check for it, but there is a lot of third parties. It's really easy to miss, and it's much cleaner getting it the first time around than it is going through the other bits. So now I'll actually demonstrate all of this. So I did do a just really basic live video of this, so I'll start swapping in and out of the live. So it'll come in a box like this. Now, on the top of that box, just move it more in a frame for you, is the keyboard, which we don't need, so we'll just move that to the side. Most sites, you're obviously going to just reuse the keyboard, so that's not something to worry about. So you take out the computer itself, take the foam off the top, move it to the side, ditto for the foam on the bottom. And then just unwrap your computer. And there you go. So there's the HP. So I'm just going to move that to the side really quickly while I do the rest. So there is a box in here. Alright. Now, this box has parts in it. So a mouse, should you need one, and a power cable. Now the other two things that are really commonly sent with these is a display adapter and a network cable. Now, the reason for the display adapter is we don't know what port your old monitor was using with your old computer. So we'll put two display adapters in there, one for VGA, one for DVI, to either HDMI or display port, depending on what the new computer has. And then you just plug it into the adapters and it'll work with just about any monitor you have. So now that it's been unboxed, you'll either wait for your appointment with Independent Solutions or call them to make the appointment for when it's going to be installed remotely. The technician will call you, or you'll call them depending on what's been arranged, and they will ask you, hey, can you plug it in to a network point or a separate power supply to see if we can set it up side by side, like I said at the beginning of the video. So here's the live that demonstrates that part. At this point, call IS. Now, what we're going to ask is if you have multiple network points. So I'll move both of these in a frame for a second. So there's the HP, there's the Dell. So the Dell's on the left there, and we're saying that that's the one we're replacing, and the HP is the one we're replacing it with. So this is the server, the old server. We're going to upgrade to this new one. Now, this is currently plugged into the power and the network. Now, the power obviously gives it electricity, the network gives it information and sends information from this machine to all the point of sales. Then it's got all the peripheral stuff like mouse, keyboard, monitor, yada yada. Now, with that being said, we can safely move everything from this machine to this one, besides the power and the network, without a problem. So we could go ahead and do that now, but one of the things that IS is going to ask you when you call them is, hey, do you have a spare network point and a spare power cord? So in the box there is a spare power cord, and we do sometimes send the network cables as well, otherwise you may have one. Now the idea behind this is that if I can leave this one on power and network and this one on power and network as well, this may have the FPOS server on it, which means your FPOS is going to stay up while we do the swap. Otherwise we'd have to take this one completely offline and plug everything into this one, and however long that takes, and however long it takes for the technician to dial in and install the FPOS software, is how long you won't have FPOS for. Typically that's about half an hour, but it really depends on who's doing it. So the cleanest method is to leave this one on power, and what will happen is at this point, this one would be on with ProfitTrack, with FPOS, with all of that. You call the technician's going to jump into this machine. They are going to start backing up all of your ProfitTrack information, so ProfitTrack itself, your FPOS, so on and so on. Now, when you unplug your monitor and keyboard and all of that, the technician's still able to use this computer as long as there's power and network in it. So power is, if I just point that out, because it's the same on all the machines, is that cable down the bottom there. It's the one kettle cord that looks like that. Now your network cord's always going to have a different color. Typically, 90% of the time, they are blue. Now in our lab, they actually happen to be purple. That's just for the test bench, it has to be a different color, but they would typically be that color. So usually they'd be blue. So you want to leave those two plugged in to your old server and try and plug them in separately to your new one. So we leave these ones in the old one, you get your power cable that came in the box with your new one, plug it into power separately, get another network cable like what I've got here, and plug it into the network separately. That way the technician's still in this machine in case they forget any information, plus then they can jump in this one and start setting it up ready for FPOS and use. More importantly, that way you could actually leave that there with all your information on it. So if you have a lot of documents, pictures, videos, yada yada yada. So what we did, we left this one on power and network, and I set up a connection from the new machine to the old one so the customer could openly access it and grab the files as they needed it. So theoretically what you'd do, I'm going to plug this back in as if it was always plugged in. You would take out your display and your keyboard, mouse, so on and so on. Move them to the side. So those are the two cables you would leave in your old server there. So we move that to the side, leave it there. So the new machine, we move over, and anything that was plugged into this one, we now plug into this one. So this is your display, so it goes in as display. And as I said, if your display is different, if you have a VGA or a DVI, which is either a blue plug or a white plug, you'll need the adapter. They come as well in a kind of like see-through little bag. You would plug in your power. You would plug in all your peripheral USBs, so that is things like your keyboard, mouse, your PDE if you have one. Then you would plug in your network. At that point you would turn it on. It would turn on. This one's not actually physically plugged in, but it would turn on. If it's been staged by us, it's going to automatically go into Windows. It'll have all the icons there already. What you'll do is you'll go into sos.exe. I'll demonstrate that in a minute, not off this camera, but off a dial-in session. Go into sos.exe. It's going to give you a 9-digit code. Call the technician you've been working with so far about whether you're able to do this setup. and then they'll dial into this machine and start setting you up from scratch and start decommissioning ProfitTrack on your old one, as well as the FPOS server and anything else that's Independent Solutions related. Alright, so I'm just going to quickly demonstrate the SOS that I was talking about. So when you boot up your machine, you'll get a standard Windows that looks a bit like what you can see on screen. It'll have a different wallpaper in the background and it'll have the start menu at the bottom, but the icons will be the same. So you'll have, you know, your VNCs for your point of sales, ProfitTrack client, ProfitTrack server, Google Chrome. But there'll be SOS. So what you'll do is once the new computer is up and running and turned on and you got this, you'll open SOS, get that 9-digit code. It does take a minute to load. Once you've got the 9-digit code, call Independent Solutions, give the technician you're dealing with for the job with that code so they can jump into the new machine and start setting it up. So the stage basically puts Windows in there, all the Windows settings, plus all the icons and ProfitTrack stuff. So theoretically, all the technician has to do at this stage is move over the ProfitTrack database and settings to the new machine and put them in place and configure them. And ditto for the FPOS and any other third-party ProfitTrack applications that you may be using. At this stage, the technician's going to be dialed in, so leave it with them. They're going to go through and install ProfitTrack, like I said. Now, as we said at the beginning, this process can take between 1 and 2 hours, depending on just how much they have to install. They'll give you a buzz back once it's done to confirm that everything's the way you'd expect it to be for ProfitTrack and for any of the third-party stuff that we deal with ProfitTrack. So if this video helped, or if you want to see more of this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, especially with getting these videos out. Otherwise, I'll catch you next time. Cheers!